I care about you more than anyone else. That's an unwavering truth, even now.
I thought that you'd forgotten.
I never said anything of the sort.
Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Geek News Anime Night, which for some reason has taken a little bit of an absence, but that's all right. We are going to finish this series, I promise. I'm your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drak. I hope everybody's having an awesome day when you are listening to this, and joining me, obviously, is my lovely wife, Andrea. Andrea, is it warm enough yet?
As warm as it will be for me.
As warm as it will be? I think August would disagree with you, but that's just me.
I meant for May, not for...
Yes, well, but we've also had a freakish May where we've actually had snow falling in May, so that's definitely something that happened.
I'm sure it's not something unusual.
So, episode 10. We are 4 episodes, well, after this one, we'll be 3 episodes away from finishing Fruits Basket Season 3. And, I mean, we just barely had the 2 very emotionally intense episodes before, where we had to deal with Kyo's internal suffering, and then ultimately the conclusion to that whole thing. And we're still dealing with aftermath in this one. So, how are you feeling walking away from episode 10? Should we... I guess we have to be honest about this one. It's actually been a couple of weeks since we watched it. And that's just because I got busy with CDL stuff, and then on top of that, I had to go and get a freaking root canal, so my mouth is feeling just so great. Thankfully, I don't have a fever anymore. That's good. So let's go ahead and get into episode 10, I Just Love Her. So, just to kind of recap here. So, Tohru's in the hospital from severe, what I'm guessing is head trauma. Safe to say. Yeah, head trauma, maybe a concussion.
Possibly.
From falling off a cliff. Somebody ought to tell her not to do that again. Because I have a feeling she'll forget. And on top of that, we also have Kurino in the hospital because, he got stabbed. Akito was working on her rogue impression, and it didn't quite work out so well. I mean, you're a rogue here, so you could tell me whether or not you did a good job.
Well,
I don't think so, personally.
No.
But that's me. And so that's literally where we start things off, is in the hospital. Actually, no, we start things off in the student council room, as now the school has become aware of Tohru being in the hospital. And so Yuki is getting questioned by everybody on what the heck happened, which in turn then leads to a question I'm kind of surprised is getting asked now, considering I have a feeling they wanted to ask it beforehand. We have, I guess her name is Kimmy. Airhead of the student council is asking what the relationship between Yuki and Tohru is, to which Manabe willingly answers, and probably like one of the better jokes of this episode is, well, it's obvious she's his mother. And I mean, the best part is like, you and me paused this and we're like, well, he's not wrong. Because she does act like a mother to Yuki. But ultimately, like, Yuki takes serious offense to this, and the junior classman is annoyed at all of this discussion, like, bottom line. And thankfully, Yuki is saved by the bell, so to speak, but rather it's that Uotani and Hanajima come to visit and ask if there's been any additional details, because everybody has gone to visit Tohru except Kyo. Kyo has been a no-show since taking Tohru to the hospital. Not really what we expected to happen after that other episode. Not really.
Yeah, he he probably didn't want to go through the just seeing her in the hospital, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe, but I have a feeling he's still dealing with his own internal suffering. That's just me. And then we cut back to the hospital where Uotani and Hanajima come to visit Tohru, and it just so happens that Akito is coming out of Toru's room, and they go and meet with Akito, and Akito is super, super penitent at this point. Like, she's openly admitting that, you know, it was her fault that Tohru got hurt and all that. That's all happening. To which Hanajima, like, just throws it out there. You're a woman, aren't you? I don't know why she felt the need to point that out, but she did. So,
Well, it's like, what, you didn't know before?
well, I mean, the presumption is nobody knew. Because, you know, they paint her out to be very masculine.
True.
So at that point, I'm pretty sure everybody assumed that that Akito was a dude. It's one of those things that I kind of wish would be clarified, because, I mean, obviously all of the Zodiac members who were aware of God coming back would have known that it was a girl. But I know I've asked this question numerous times, but does Yuki know? Does Kyo know? Because that's never been clarified.
Well, probably they don't, for sure.
Considering that, is it safe to say Haru has, like, some kind of a moral code when it comes to being a man? I don't think that granted, he was super angry when this happened, but I would think if he knew Akito was a woman, he probably wouldn't have wanted to go black and bash his face in. Kind of thing. I think he would have held himself back a little bit. But that's why I have the presumption that maybe the younger Somas don't actually know that Akito's a woman. But I love the fact that Hanajima, just out of nowhere, you're a woman, aren't you? What, were you looking at were you looking at her shirt for boob imprints? I mean, Hanajima, like, that's not even what he was saying. And she also mentions that Kurano is in the hospital, which I guess Uotani didn't know. And so Akito lets Uotani know that, you know, the room and everything like that. And we then cut to Kurano's room where Uotani decides to visit him. And I want to call this conversation awkward, but it kind of isn't because of how short it is.
Yeah.
Basically, he immediately kind of apologizes, saying he doesn't deserve to have her there, visiting him, but also saying that he's decided that there's one more thing he needs to do for Akito in order to help her, which is that he needs to leave. Which I completely agree. Like, where are you at with that decision? I completely agree with it. I agree with his reasoning. He basically says that Akito will not change unless he leaves. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. What about you?
That he wants to leave and...
Yeah, his reasoning is like he has to leave because otherwise Akito won't change.
Then yeah, he should leave, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and you and me are kind of on the same page of, like, he shouldn't have stayed the way he did. You know, because he basically sentenced himself to some kind of death because he therefore had to live for Akito. He couldn't live his own life. But I also like the fact that he mentions this, and also, you know, that it'll also be good for him too. And Uotani just kind of steps back and says, "Well, you're a big boy. You can do whatever you want. Just know that I'm gonna follow you. That I'm gonna be a part of that." And during all of this, Uotani's having, like, this internal monologue, thinking, you know, that she's basically thinking that there is a third wheel in the relationship, and ultimately she thinks she's the third wheel because Akito and Kurano knew each other first.
Yeah.
But now she's like, I don't want to be, the way she puts it is, I don't want to be a footnote anymore. And she's like, I want to follow you, and if you don't get why, I'm not going to tell you. Which it's safe to say what the reason is. She's very much in love with him. I'm starting to consider this to be Soma syndrome, because as soon as a Soma boy walks in the room, all the girls just immediately take their underwear off and throw it at him. I mean, you giggle, but I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I know that.
This doesn't happen to Soma girls for some reason, but for Soma guys, it does. And so at that point, yeah, I think that's kind of like the nice little anchor that we have for how Kurano's life is going to change, is because he's going to have Uetani with him. We then cut back to Yuki and Shigure heading home. And apparently, since Tohru's been in the hospital, they've already eaten themselves out of house and home. They are having to, basically, they're back to where they were in episode 1. They're having to rely on takeout and convenience store
food
and all that to stay alive. So I just love the fact that, you know, they make it sound like this has been like a day or two. It's been a day or two, you're out of food?
How
Really?
could they be out that quickly?
I mean, granted, like, the Japanese are very conservative when they buy their groceries and things like that, but I mean, I think you would at least have something for at least 3 days, you know?
Mhm.
And it doesn't sound like it's been that long since she's been out of the house. So they're walking home. Ultimately, they get there and find out that Shigure's house's front door is open. Not sure why. They go inside, and Hatsuharu is waiting at the table, basically saying, well, I just took advantage of the fact that the door is open. And explain, and so he wants an update, and they explain that Tohru is going to be released that afternoon to come home.
Yeah.
To which I have to mention this because I forgot this funny moment. Haru explains that he has updated Rin on the situation with. So I have to tell this bit because you and I were laughing our butts off when this happened because it's so out of the blue. But Haru basically updates everybody on he has updated Rin on Tohru's situation, and I love how he explains this. He's like, I told her first she turned blue, then she turned gray, then she turned some sort of brown. 5 stars. Just like, what? And just to make things even weirder, also, I think her boobs increased in size.
What he's telling about?
Yeah, he's telling. This is Rin's reaction to Tohru being in the hospital. First she turned blue, then she turned gray, then she turned brown, and then apparently her boobs got bigger.
What, this is what Rin said about?
No. When Haru was explaining that to Rin that Tohru was in the hospital, this is how she reacted.
Yeah, but why? Where would all the colors come from?
I don't know. And that's what's amazing about it. It's just like... It just kind of gives you that whole hinting that maybe Haru sees the world in anime. Like, everybody's just an anime character.
Yeah.
So he's like the fourth wall breaking character. I just love that he's like, first she turned blue, and then I don't know why I want to say red, but first she turned blue, then she turned a pale gray, and then she turned brown. 5 stars. And then the boob thing comes up, and it's like, we were already in left field, and now we're in negative left field. So, oh my gosh. I think at one point we both were about to fall off the bed when we saw that for the first time. We had to rewind. We had to make sure that was what we heard. So then they start hearing noises upstairs, and Haru openly admits, like, the door was open when he got there, which they all think is Shigure's fault because, you know, he's so lazy. But when they start hearing things upstairs, they're like, oh, Kyo must be here. To which Yuki, is it safe to say, like, a berserker mode goes off on Yuki when he comes to this realization?
Pretty much, yes.
Is it safe to say we haven't seen this desire for vengeance on Yuki's face until now?
At least not
He's
that
been
serious.
fairly reserved for most of the series, and now he's actually ready to take the fight to Kyo. And he goes up to Kyo, and Kyo's packing his duffel bag. Because Kyo is still of the impression that he will ruin everybody's life around him, and that's the way it is. Like, he's still internally punishing himself. Like, it's almost like even though it's been one episode, he has not learned a damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like Kyo's come down with a serious case of Cloud Strife syndrome. And Yuki, understandably so, gets really haughty and pissy with him. Basically just saying, what, are you going to run from your problems this entire time? And which ultimately ends up in them having basically the fight they should have had seasons ago.
Yeah.
Where they ultimately kind of admit to each other that they've been looking up to the other. So even though Kyo has hated the rat, and even though we know that Kyo blamed the rat for all the things that were bad in his life as a psychological failsafe or a psychological safeguard.
Yeah.
So that he didn't shatter his own sense of self. He actually looked up to Yuki because Yuki had everything that he wanted, including, for some reason, Kyo was of the impression that Yuki was very much interested in Tohru and that he might be the better person to be with Tohru. To which, this is why I'm saying Berserker mode, because at this point, this is like the most emotion we have seen from Kyo, and it's straight up rage. I had to watch the episode again just to make sure I had everything right, and it was actually really satisfying to watch this part again, because it's just Yuki constantly saying, go to hell, go to hell, go to hell, and just beating the crap out of Kyo. And ultimately, we find out that Yuki looked up to Kyo as well, and wanted what Kyo had. And especially when it comes to Tohru, because in his eyes, in Yuki's eyes, Kyo had one thing that Yuki never had. He had the ability to make Tohru happy whenever he was in the room. So I love the fact that they both looked at themselves as like this is why you don't do hero worship, people. Because that's basically what they did. They idolized each other. And I'm so glad I've mentioned this in podcasts and stuff like that, but I heard it in therapy myself, which is like, this is the problem with hero worship. When you put somebody else on a pedestal, somebody has to go in the shit bucket. And guess who that is? It's usually you.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so at that point, that's what happened, is they put up the other in the pedestal, and then they put themselves in the shit bucket. And this is why you don't do hero worship, people, because nobody wants to end up in the shit bucket.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, Yuki, after listening this out and just being super pissed at Kyo, he finally says, well, if you looked up to me and you appreciate my opinion, go to her right now. Which I'm pretty sure the entire audience was like, yes, please.
Yes, just go to her already.
So Kyo rushes out the door because it's about the time that Tohru needs to be picked up. So he rushes out the door to go and find Tohru. But before he goes, he has one other stop to make. Which at that point, the entire audience went, motherfucker! He decides to go and visit his dad. And this is like the one thing this episode did wrong, in my opinion. Because I get why they did it for Kyo, because he needed like a level of closure from this issue. in order to move on, but this was not the episode to do it, and I will stick to my guns on that.
Really? Why? You'd rather have it a separate episode?
Given what we learn, I probably wouldn't have wanted to have it happen, period. Because ultimately what we learn is that Kyo's dad is the scum of the earth. In fact, I'm guaranteeing you that 80% of the situations that Kyo blames himself for were caused by this son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Because it really looks like, because of the circumstances of Kyo's birth, I'm pretty sure it's it's hard to say. Kyo's mom might have had that deep resentment that we hear about from Momiji, where they either cling to the child of the Zodiac or they reject them completely, and it's possible that either could have happened. Because I could totally see a mother like that clinging to that child, but also internally hating themselves for giving birth to an animal instead of a baby. But one thing I can say is that Kyo's dad did not make any situation better. I don't know how else to say. He's a bastard. He absolutely is a bastard. Because we then learn like a lot of the stuff that happened in Kyo's family, and a lot of it was just Kyo's dad yelling at Kyo's mom, constantly reasserting that she gave birth to this demon, to this thing, and I'm pretty sure that that's what spurred on the suicide. I mean, there's a possibility that, you know, there was internal self-hatred with the mom. I mean, it's possible. And if that case, like, all the dad ever did was he just egged it on. But I almost wonder if it wasn't there before and it got placed there from the dad being an abusive son of a bitch. And then it got even worse because once the mom was gone, not only was he being blamed for being a disgusting monster, but also he was being blamed for taking his wife away.
Oh, yeah.
And what makes it even worse is, like, we find out this guy has no problem drinking during the middle of the day, and he does it regularly. Apparently, like, his big deal is, like, he goes into his den and listens to records and just sits there in his emotions and never deals with them. But I guess one of the things that has just made him the most excited is when Kyo is going to have to go and be, quote, punished for his crimes. And the way he's going to be punished is that Akito will put him in the cell of the cat, and he will never be able to leave. To which at that point, like, then there will be true justice for my wife's death. Kind of thing. And so we get to have a conversation between him and Kyo, where Kyo's just like, I'm not going into that cell, and there's nobody that can make me, and I'm going to go and have a happy life, and you can sit here in your squalor. And if you don't like it, go fuck yourself. I'll be back tomorrow. He literally has that moment. He's like, I'm going to go live my life now. I'll be back to check on you soon. It's like, I would leave this guy in his pile of filth. I would literally do it. Like, what's going through your head when you see this guy? Like, we got a sneak peek of him when Kazuma went to visit, but this was much more of an experience.
Man, I'm surprised he didn't commit suicide by now. You know. Or killed himself or whatever, if he was that.
He might just be too much of a coward to do it.
Yeah.
Most abusers are.
Oh, yes.
So that's the sad reality, is like Kyo's mom might have actually been braver than him and just got worn down by his abuse and then ultimately just went on with it. But he might just be too afraid to do the deed.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Jeez, but he is.
Like, honestly, if you met this kind of person in real life, what would be your reaction to him?
I would just walk away.
If you were actively seeing him abusing somebody, would you walk away or would you step in?
Well, that depends on how bad he is.
If the dude is an asshole and he's alone, then I'm fine. But if he's abusing somebody, I might step in.
Oh, yeah.
I might step in and say, get the fuck out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. And
as long as he's not armed with anything.
It's easy enough to disarm a drunk man. It really is. So at that, like, that's kind of my viewpoint on the matter. But the part that just makes me go WTF is Kyo's like, I'll be back tomorrow. Why? Just leave him alone. Leave him in his depression. He obviously doesn't want to get out because he's had years to do it and he just won't do it. And we actually get the impression. So this guy has a maid. Either that or a caretaker, I don't know. Whatever the Somas gave him. And she even admits, like, this is his everyday habit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, cut this guy off. This guy cannot be bringing anything in to the Somas. So at that point, just cut him off and let him sit in his squalor. Because I guarantee you, his life ain't going to change until you basically cut him off and either I'm not advocating for this, if he offs himself or he actually decides to go and do something about it.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're giving him this cushy lifestyle, I mean, obviously he's going to go and drink the day away. Which isn't healthy even for a normal person, much less a very resentful person like this guy is. And this is the thing that makes me hate it the most. It's such a takeaway from everything that's going on in the episode that, yeah, I getting back to your question, yeah, this should have been handled in a different episode. It really should have. Maybe with Tohru there, I don't know. Because I don't honestly think that the Tohru needs to be there because some people are just lost causes.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, for a while there, I was about ready to write off Akito as a lost cause, but no, it's very clear that Kyo's dad is a lost cause, though. Because that's not changing.
Even more so.
Yeah.
Than compared to Akito.
Well, and that actually, speaking of that, so the next scene that we get into is back at the estate, where it's a complicated thing that happens here. Akito officially, I don't even know how he would do this. He's just, yeah, this is where he says it, or where she says it. Sorry.
I know, you're so used
where she officially says it, that she is going to release everybody from the curse. I was not aware that Akito had this power.
Well, if she did, then she was afraid to let everyone go.
Well, apparently she isn't now. And what's funny is that the older maid of Akito immediately is like, please don't do this, master. I don't know a life outside of this. And it basically, it is a 60-year-old version of Akito being told by Akito that you're going to be all right. You'll find things to do. It's such a weird conversation to have happen. But the biggest thing that's weird about it is, like, you had the terminate button and you didn't tell anybody? The fuck? How's that work? Do you go to the secret? Do you go to the secret Soma room where it looks like the Death Star and you just terminate the curse? What the hell? How has it not been done already?
Apparently so.
Okay, you can just turn it off. All right. I have a problem with this. I really do. Because this feels like forced writing. Oh, Akito's been able to turn off the curse the entire time. What? What? Sorry. I need a minute, Andrea. Distract people.
I don't get it.
I don't either. And it hurts. And what makes it even worse is, like, Akito's come to these revelations and then gets confronted by a 60-year-old version of herself. I don't know how I'll live. This is all I've ever known how to do. God damn it.
Why does she...
God damn it. So you don't think you can be a housekeeper in somebody else's house?
You can't do the same type of job at just somewhere else?
Yes! It's literally same shit, different day. What is so wrong with this?
And even if she didn't go, it's not like she would just, she couldn't just stay and just do the same stuff. I'm sure.
I know it's the silly... Okay, we just barely got off the supreme asshole that was Kyo's dad. But then we have this, and it's just like, what? What? You could turn off the curse the entire time, and you've just decided, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna turn off the curse. And then this old woman comes up to you, I don't know if this is going to work, Akito. I've never done anything outside of this house. You don't have a separate residence?
Apparently
You've
not.
never had to go, wash your own ass? I mean, I get that you've had to wash Akito's ass, but you haven't had to wash your own? Like, I'm sorry, I don't feel bad for you. There's housekeeping jobs everywhere. Especially in Japan. So yeah, that's, there really isn't much to get into with that scene aside from, which I have a feeling this is going to be brought up when we wrap up this season, but Akito had the terminate switch the entire time. He could have ended the curse at any given moment. She could have ended the curse at any given moment and decided not to.
Okay.
Not okay, but okay.
You might as well just accept it.
I refuse, but okay. So then we get to the last scene where Kyo finally makes it to the hospital. Turns out that Uotani and Hanajima are coming out with Tohru right then and there. And Kyo sees Tohru, and their eyes meet. And they're staring very longingly at each other. And this is literally how this episode ends. Tohru runs off, and Kyo goes after her.
He's kind of
We don't know why she ran off, but she did.
She ran off and
he chases after her.
And Kyo's like, what the F?
The audience is what the F at this point.
I know.
I mean, granted, it gets answered next episode, but, like, we just got done with the what the fuckery that was, oh yeah, I had the kill switch the entire time. But now we have, oh, hey, the lovers are about to meet again. What? And I'm glad to say that we're not the only ones confused, because Hanajima and Uotani are both very confused. So, yeah. And I'm not going to let you explain why, because that's in the next episode is when we find out. But what's going through your head when you immediately see Tohru dart off in a random direction?
I just want to slap her silly.
Little bit, yeah. Little bit. And I don't think there's much to add on that, aside from... I was just more along the lines of, okay, what was the bigger what the fuck moment? That or finding out that Akito had the kill switch. Or realizing that Kyo's dad is just a horrible, horrible human being. So at that point, let's wrap this episode up. So what did this episode do right? What did it do wrong?
Well,
The first half was right. Second half was where it went all wrong. Just, that's the best way I know how to describe it. The first half is exactly where this episode should have gone, and the second half is where it went off the rails. Bad.
it was just out of nowhere.
Yes. Do you agree with my assessment, or do you disagree with it?
Well, I can't disagree.
Okay, so what did this episode do right, and what did it do wrong for you?
Same as yours.
All right. And then out of 5, what would we give I Just Love Her?
3.
I'm at a 2.5, and the only reason is because, like, half this episode is good, and it's doing exactly what should have happened, and the other half is what the fuckery. So at that point, I have every problem with it. So, yeah, 2.5, it is that, and I seriously need to send this episode a bill for all the whiplash it caused me that wasn't hilarious. Because Hatsuharu's level of whiplash was great. But then everything else, I was... So, 2.5 for me. What about you?
3.
3? Okay. So, at that point, that's it for episode 10. When we come back, we will be doing episode 11. And then there will be 2 episodes left in this series of Fruits Basket. And we get to wrap up then. So are you excited for the next 2 episodes?
Yeah.
Or the final 2?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to wrap up episode 11 in the next podcast. Thank you guys so much for showing your support. We really do appreciate it. Continue to show your support by subscribing to the RSS feed at geekynro.libsyn.com or listening at either Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, or Player.fm. We are very happy for whatever efforts are given by you guys to be able to support this podcast and this RSS feed. We really do appreciate it, and we will be back next time for Fruits Basket Season 3, Episode 11. So until then, take care.